What's going on, family? What's going on? It is time for our Saturday Leaders Are Readers Book Club. I'm excited about today. We have some guests. We have an announcement. We're going to be getting into our new book this month and having a conversation about that. But before we do so, you see, I already got my phone out. Before we do so, I need you to do me a favor. Press the share button. I need you to do me a favor and press the share button. After you do that, let us know where you are going to be tuning in from. I am not just going to ask you to do that. I'm going to do it myself as well. Do it myself as well. I'm excited because our YLC family, is not just comprised and filled with good church and good shout tracks, but our visionary, our founder, Elder Mark Moore Jr., has carved out space for us to be readers as well. And that is so important, especially in today's climate, especially with what's going on right now. And we are going to do several things today. We're going to end one chapter. We're going to conclude our book of the month for May, which was The Happiness of Pursuit. And as we close the book to that chapter, we're going to open the book to a new chapter in a new book. And I brought on some guests who have already read this book. And because of that, I am extremely excited. So do me a favor, press that share button, because you all know what we discussed last week, but we're going to get into this week. Let me know where you're tuning in from. We have Aaron all the way from DC. God bless you, my friend. We're glad to have DC in the house. We got my sister. She's from headquarters. Ayana, she's here every week. We appreciate you, sis, for pressing the share button and letting everybody know what is going on here at our book club. My sis, I miss you. Delia, she's been on here as we've been discussing the happiness of pursuit. Excuse me. But we're going to another chapter today. So thank you so much for your time on here. But we're getting ready to get, I'm gonna just flash it real quick. We're getting ready, and this is why I need you to press the share button. Because for the next 4 weeks, we're going to be discussing the new Jim Crow. Press the share button. Press the share button right now. We are getting ready to dive into this much-needed book. We're getting ready to get some insight all the way from Michigan. What's up, my sister, Miss Jackson? Sister Jackson, I pray all is well up there in Michigan. But because of that and the climate and everything that's going on, this is what we are getting ready to discuss. So because of that, I need you to press the share button. Last month, let's put that down for a second. Last month, we dealt with the happiness of pursuit, finding the quest that will bring purpose to your life. We had some amazing talks, some amazing dialogue centered around that. And it really challenged us on the definition of a quest. Quest is not just a lifestyle change. It's not just, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But a quest is a long journey that's going to have some ups and some downs, but it's going to add to the purpose in your life. So we started this, and it almost seems as if it was prophetic, because now we as a nation, we're on a quest to justice. We're on a quest to justice. So we started off here dealing with the happiness of pursuit, dealing with the importance of a quest, defining what a quest is. And now we're going to continue the discussion because we are on a quest for justice. I need everybody who's tuned in right now, don't just press share. I need you to go ahead and order this book if you have not ordered it. If you have read this book, great, but we're getting ready to discuss this now. I may even I see my brother and my friend, Bishop Antoine Jackson from the STL. I know he's read this book. I may bring him on. I'm going to start it out there. We'll talk offline. Because this is our first week, you guys did not know about this book. You did not know that we were going to reading it. I just wanted to announce it to you today. And I wanted to bring in some friends who have already read this book to give us some insight on what to expect. What's up, Joanne? Good to see you, my sister. On what to expect and why this book is such an important read right now. I got some friends. They're more like family members who are going to join us today to have a discussion on why this book is so important for now and what we can expect on the inside of this. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them on right now. First, my sister. She is my unofficial counselor. I love her dearly. I want to bring on Miss Denisha Bonner. I want to bring on my sis, Denisha Bonner, at this time. How are you doing?
I am so excited to be here. How are you?
Come on, glasses.
You
Come
know I
on,
got to be right
glasses.
for the YLC. We don't just show up any kind of way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll talk a little more about your push to me to even get into this book. Embarrassed to even admit I have not read it, but excited to dive in it as well. It was not just her, but it was also my friend and my brother. They both are not just, she's not just my sister. Who I'm going to bring on next is not just my brother. I look at her as my big sister. And this other guest, we've been friends for a while, but it really took us being in quarantine for me to realize he's not just a friend. He's not just a brother, but he is a big brother. And he was another push for me to say, man, you got to read this book. You need to dive into this book. And that is all the way, I believe it is, I'm going to just say Michigan, because I don't know if it's Detroit or Warren. I think they all kind of close. We got Pastor Dorian Cass from Life Application Ministries Church. How are you doing, my friend?
Man, I'm wonderful. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. We were on here before, and Pastor has lost his clerical voice, his ecclesiastical tone. He's just chill right now, and we appreciate that. Well, before we get into this discussion, I'm going to ask everybody to press the share button, but go a step further. Don't just press the share button. Tag a friend. Tag a friend who you know what? I think they need to read this. I think they need to be a part of this discussion. I think they need to know what's going on at YLC. And tag them right now, and let's get into this. The new Jim Crow. Mass incarceration in the age of color blindness. So we're going to go ladies first, and I kind of gave you a few of the questions, but I thought of a question that was not on here. So I'm going to throw it to you now. So you're not prepared for it. Here's the first question. Why, well, we'll stick in order. Why is this book needed now? You were talking to me. You don't just talk to me. You don't just encourage me, but you were talking to others. Why is this book? Why is this needed now?
I think for me, one of the reasons this book is needed now, I posted the other day, in the beginning of 2020, and for some of us, even before, most of us received prophetic words about 2020 being the year of vision and seeing and all the things that we were going to see. And I remember sharing that word, and God showed me the other day, he said that word was still true. We just didn't think we were going to be seeing some of the things that we saw this year. I've heard people say we never saw a pandemic like this. We've never seen racial injustice uprisings like this. And so when we think about being able to see clearly, I think this was a book that really helped me to see what was happening in our system, to see systemic oppression, to see institutionalized racism. And now, in this moment of clarity, for many people, in this moment of revelation and vision, I think this book is so timely to help us really see the deception of the enemy. You know, the Bible talks about spiritual wickednesses in high places, and really being able to see how that has negatively impacted our lives and what steps we need to take to move forward into really having change.
Pastor Cass, I was on I was not on, I was viewing a conversation earlier this week. There's been a lot of discussions, and I'm gonna get you in some trouble and I ask you about them later. But a lot of discussions that I've been tuning into, and this one particular discussion It was an older gentleman who had an amazing heart. And one thing that he said is that we have to keep the main thing the main thing. And his push was that the main thing is not politics. The main thing is not injustice. The main thing is the salvation of the soul. And we agree with that. We believe that we're not here just to be civil rights agents, but we are here to be witnesses of this great gospel of Jesus Christ. So I asked Denisha the question, why is this book needed now? I want to make it a little bit more narrow for you. Why is this book needed now in the Black church? Not just anybody. We all need to read this. And saved, unsaved, whatever you are, wherever you find yourself in, you could join us in the journey with this book. You hang out with us long enough, and you're going to get what's on us. So, but why specifically does the Black church need to dive into the new Jim Crow at this moment?
Hey, man, listen, thanks for having me on, and thanks for checking me about my preacher voice. You know, I'm in my sanctuary, so it kind of happens unintentionally. But I appreciate you guys having me. But specifically, this book, and in general, my big thing is not just about this specific book, but this type of book in general. I tell people all the time, the value isn't just in reading, but the value is in that you're reading the right books, right? And I find Black church folks sometimes read some of the worst books around. Just because somebody wrote it doesn't mean it's valuable. Just being honest, you know, so many books I see being sold in Black churches, man, they're not worth the paper that they're printed on. I'm just being honest. Don't. And that's just in church in general, right? So here's my big thing, and I tell people about a book like this. There's two things as to why this book is important, and it relates to everyone and the Black church, is when you crack open a book that is filled with statistics, that is filled with history, that is filled with facts and not just opinions, and you realize the depth of learning that we need to do and unlearning that we need to do. When you pick this book, I promise you, what you're going to find out, for Black people in particular, what you're going to find out is things that we feel in our gut. You know, things that happen to us that we may think is anecdotal because of our just personal experience. What you're going to find out is the depth of reasoning as to why things are the way that they are is so much deeper than any of us could ever know, that we're here by way of choices, not by happen chance. Like, we didn't just, happen upon Black people being incarcerated at the rate that they are, or even thinking the way that we do about Black people. So I believe the Bible tells the church in Proverbs, in all thy getting, get an understanding. That understanding, information, knowledge is something that you have to go out and acquire. And I believe that if one of God's most primary characteristics is his knowledge, he is all knowing. And if we are to properly represent God in the earth, our level of knowledge has to be, at least our pursuit of it has to be indicative of a God whose knowledge is one of his key characteristics. And books like this that increase our knowledge of how the world works, systems in the world, are how we're going to separate ourselves. And it's critical. And I'm going to be honest, we'll touch on it later. Some of these so-called conversations I've been saying have shown me that people haven't been pursuing knowledge and information. They've been going off gut instinct for a long time. And man, this is the thing. I'm not saying your gut is wrong. I'm saying your gut instinct has no clue the depth of the problem that we're dealing with.
We're going to get everybody on before we get them upset. So we're going to come back to that later. Right now, we're going to work on getting these numbers up, and then we're going to deal with that. And this is to either one of you. From my just kind of surface level skimming through this as we get ready for my discussion with you all, I have not read this book. I say that, as I said earlier, embarrassed to admit it. But I want to let somebody know you're not the only one that hasn't read it as well. So hopefully my shame can be a push for you. But in here it talked about how a lot of this started in the Reagan era, which we know, dealing with the war on drugs. I was amazed by the amazing statistics as it dealt with the increase in drug uses, the increase in crime, and how that was really not the case, but because of the rhetoric coming out of the White House. And then it talked about the media really grabbing a hold of this message and then pushing out this message that was not based on facts. Another thing that I found, just kind of going through a little bit here, it talked about how when this initial push on the war against drugs started, that they said less than 3% of the American population even felt like the drug issue was a top priority. So I read a little bit, a top priority as far as what needs to be taken care of. So I want to ask you guys about the media, right? The media and the role that the media plays. I'm laughing because I know some of the conversations we've had with some of you all after this. What the power that the media has in this. So let's not just deal with the book. Let's be relevant a little bit and deal with what we're looking at today with the killing, the lynching of Mr. George Floyd. We have our sister in Louisville. We have a list of so many. How important is it for us to listen to the media, but also fact check the media as well? How important is that so that we do not get bamboozled as many of us did as it's kind of laid out in this book? And that's for either one of you. Who wants to take a stab at it first?
Reverend?
Sure. Listen, I think it's so important for us, and I'm going to do my best, Lewis, not to cause any trouble before you give me the go ahead. But I think I just allude to what I referred to earlier, how much unlearning we have to do. As soon as you read books like this and you get the level of information that is included in here, you realize how indoctrinated all of us have been to see ourselves a certain way. And I mean through our educational system, through our movies, television, and news. And educating ourselves is the only way you can inoculate yourself to that conditioning. I mean, it's little things like all of our heroes are nonviolent, but all white America heroes are generals and army leaders, and revolutionaries, and ours are all, like, and that's just literally what's in our history books, right? And when you educate yourself, it allows you to view the news as what most of it is, and that is entertainment and agenda pushing, and not genuine education or genuine informing, rather, of people. In the only way, because there aren't many systems besides maybe our HBCUs that are designed to educate us without that lens of white supremacy. So that's why we have to intentionally go and read our books and educate ourselves. Otherwise, everything we get is filtered through the lens of white supremacy, which is why when you see and you read about the war on drugs and 3 strikes rule laws and mandatory minimum sentencing, there were Black people who were in favor of that. It wasn't just like white people were the only ones saying that. Black people were in favor of that. And it was because, as Carter G. Woodson would say, the miseducation of the Negro. Like, we were taking all of our information through these filters that on every side of us would tell us what to think about Black people and about ourselves, and perpetuate false narratives. So this is important, to be able to watch the news. Well, as a matter of fact, choose what news you're going to watch, choose how much of it you're going to watch, and be able to filter it properly through real information and not agendas and entertainment.
Denise, you got your glasses. Well, you both got your glasses, but you got you got your bedazzled glasses on here. You got your sparkle. So what lens? So Pastor Cass dealt with the importance of not just diving into everything that we hear on, Lord knows not, I'm not gonna call no networks out, on certain networks. So you got your glasses on. What lens? As I'm watching the news, if I'm watching CNN, as I'm watching MSNBC, as I'm watching, if I'm backsliding Fox, if I'm watching whatever I'm doing, as I'm watching this, what lens should I view? Or maybe even your local news. We have individuals here. One of the amazing things about YLC is it's not just in Atlanta, it's not just in Ohio, but this is literally a movement that is sweeping the world, not just these 50 states. So even if it's in the local news, what lens should we look at and view our daily news coverage?
So I think we have to view our lens through two lenses. First is obviously the Spirit of God. One of my friends used to say that we have to be spirit-led in all things.
Does that mean I got
And
to speak in tongues while I'm watching CNN?
it absolutely
I
does
want us to
not.
dig a little bit. I don't want us to spirit. What does that mean
Right.
to look at
So
through
the
my
Spirit
spiritual
of
lens?
God, we also have to think about what is the Spirit of God. Someone said yesterday, we're going to stand on the word of the Lord. And I said, well, what word? Right. The Bible tells us in Micah 6:8, he said, I told you what the will of the Lord is. They're asking, tell us God's will. What is the will of the Lord? And in Micah 6:8, he says, love justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Right. So if I'm going to look at this through the Spirit of God, I have to think about what God's characteristic is. What did Jesus look like? Jesus came to show us the Father. So how did Jesus enact? And Jesus was a social justice revolutionary. So when I listen to the news, if I'm going to listen to it or look at it through the lens of the Spirit of God, if people are still talking to oppressing the poor and not taking care of the widows and the orphans, which James tells us is true religion, then we have not yet gotten to the place where we really need to see how God is seeing. Do we see each other through the heart of Christ? And when people on different networks and are having different opinions and they're just doing this and they're discounting other people's experiences, that one is not the Spirit of God. That's not the heart of God. So when I say we have to be spirit-led in all things, we have to go into it with the mind of Christ. And one of the things I always say is sound bites don't tell the story. A lot of the times the news produces sensationalism or salacious information with sound bites. And for good and for bad, they'll show the soundbite of something that the president said that gets us all riled up, or they'll show the soundbite of someone, rioting or looting, and that gets certain people riled up. So not taking just the sound bites, but as Ecclesiastic says, here the conclusion of the whole matter, right? And really having that transformed heart and mind to see exactly what God is trying to show us, and to see what the enemy is trying to show us and what the enemy's agenda is. Because if we're not careful, we'll be swayed to and fro. And then, as you said, go fact check in the word, fact check and information about the word. I always tell people it's not enough to read the Bible. You have to read about the Bible. What is the history of what we're reading? What's the context of what we're reading? So that way we know, if I live in New York City, when they're talking about certain things in the Bible, they're not talking about what we was experiencing down in Times Square. So how do I make what I'm reading in the Bible relevant to my times? And that absolutely takes the Spirit of God. And then making sure that we're getting all types of opinions. If all I listen to is one news station, I'm going to get the agenda of that news station. I flip between CNN to MSNBC to Google to my phone to my laptop to my Mac. I got all kinds of ways that I'm checking the information and then ultimately running that through the filter of the Holy Spirit. There's the written word and the spoken word. What is God saying? Not just what did he say, but what is he saying in what you're seeing? And making sure that we are continually listening for the voice of God and what we're seeing, what we're feeding ourselves, what we're taking in.
I love it. I love it. Dorian, do you have anything to say on to that? Do you have anything to add to that?
The most important news you can watch is your local news.
Why?
Long story short.
Why?
Because that is the news. The local news is one of the last bastions of news that we have, whose main job is to inform as opposed to produce more viewers. And they have less of an agenda, as my sister said, in order to create a narrative as opposed to tell what's happened. And furthermore, local politics, local matters are really where most of us have our biggest impact. It is a smokescreen to have us completely obsessed with what Donald Trump is doing, and we don't know what our local school board is doing. We don't know what our city council is doing. We don't know what our mayors are doing. We don't know what our sheriffs and police chiefs are doing, when they actually have the largest impact on our day-to-day lives, more so than the president. So your local news is really and I am an advocate for supporting your local news and your local newspapers, because they tell the stories that matter most immediately to us and in ways in which we can genuinely impact them. It is a smokescreen to have us obsessed with the president, whose legislations generally have to be filtered through our local politicians and our local elections. So your local news is where you should spend most of your time.
Let's get back into this. We're getting ready to start the journey into this. We're getting ready to start this journey I'm excited. I'm believing. Let me throw this out there. I'm believing, and I'm going to get with Elder Moore. I'm going to get with our YLC core team on maybe we're going to do something. I want to connect with 100 young people. I want to connect with 100 young people to go through this book, and I think that could be a start. We're going to post a flyer next week. We're going to jazz it up. We're going to do it YLC style. This is just really the formal announcement, I guess you could say. So as these hundreds, I'm speaking by faith, of young people are diving into this book, I want to encourage those watching this. Maybe you've read it before. Read it again with us. Read it again with us as well. What can we expect? What can we expect as we're reading this? I dealt with some of, just kind of just those random surface level Google facts about the book type of facts. What can we expect? I'm gonna change the question. What should we be looking for as we're reading this book? Yeah, I'm gonna ask that way. What should we be looking for as we read this book? I'm gonna ask Denisha to go first, and then after Denisha, I'm gonna have Pastor Cass follow up. And Pastor, as you follow up, you can go ahead and stir some trouble if you want. But we're gonna start off with Sister Denisha and Pastor Cass on what to expect and what should we be looking for when we dive into the new Jim Crow. But before they do that, press share. I'm telling you, it's about to get good. We're going to even deal with the white church and why they need to read this. So press the share button. Denisha, I'm going to shut up now. The floor is yours.
I read this book, I don't know, I think right when Michelle Alexander first wrote it, it was on the news and I saw it. But I think what to expect when you read this book, for me, I've encountered anger. I felt bamboozled. I felt guilty. I felt sometimes rage, because I think she does such a wonderful job of uncovering the farce, the whammies that have been perpetrated. I think she exposes those in such a wonderful way that it leaves you feeling like, oh my God, they got us. It worked. And then the different feelings that come from behind that moment of enlightening, that you real now you feel angry. When I graduated with my master's in counseling, my first job was in a correctional facility. And one of the things I thought was, I wish I had this book back in 2005, because even how I counseled, particularly young men of color, my perspective was so wrong and it was so incorrect. And I remember saying stupid things to them like, nobody's afraid of the police except for people who have done wrong. And if you just do the right things, you won't. And now, 20 years later, 15 years later, I see so much more of the error of my ways and how much I was perpetuating that system of mass incarceration. And so for me, it was a lot of remorse and regret, which also now fuels my passion of trying to make sure everybody gets this information, whether it's through this book or many others, to actually now change our approach, especially our approach of helping people. So as young leaders, right, we are called to lead. We're called to lead people out of ignorance, which is even the real word for educator. So as we're thinking about how we can show up, this is such important information, and deal with those feelings that you will feel. There are some days I felt like I don't need to see anybody else that don't look like me for about 48 hours. I need to, let the Holy Ghost bring me back to a place of love, because I was so stirred up. Now we want to switch into righteous indignation, though, like actually being stirred up, whereas the Bible says be angry but don't sin. So I think we can expect some frustration, anger, guilt, even when we're like, we did the thing they wanted us to do. And I think what we should look for ways to actually use the information that she's presenting to us. Look for ways to go back and fix what was wrong. I know we talk about and I totally believe in, at a high level, reparations, but where are some repairs that we even can do at a local level, at an individual level, at a familial level, at a community level, to actually change? Like, one of the things I decided this week, like, I'm taking the word crackhead out of my vocabulary. In our culture, our community, we'll call somebody a crackhead in a minute. But when we understand even the war on drugs and how crack was infiltrated into our government, we are still perpetuating things 20, 30 years later that was started by the agendas of white supremacy. So I think we should look for ways that we are still carrying on the agenda without them having to even say it. I remember growing up in the 80s, and I'll say this nonstop, and I remember the Just Say No campaigns. I remember seeing Nancy Reagan and Barbara Bush come on with this, dare to keep a kid off drugs, not really realizing how much that was a part of the uh, schema that they were trying to build for us. And so now going back and dismantling those strongholds or those house of thoughts that actually are part of our everyday lives without the Nancy Reagan commercials and without the DARE programs, but we still are perpetuating the madness.
I love it, Pastor.
Listen, I couldn't have said it better myself. I was just going to tell everybody, get ready to be mad and be ready to pray yourself back to some semblance of peace. Because I'm going to tell you something. You don't have to look for anything. It's going to find you as soon as you crack this book open. It's going to find your preconceived notions. It's going to find your biases. It's going to find the places where you have been miseducated. It's going to find the places where you have accepted a narrative of us as a people. It's going to find those places. So all you and I have to do when you open this book is be open to having those places challenged, right? I think that's the most important thing. You don't have to look for anything. I promise you, she's coming to find you. As soon as you crack this book open, she's coming to find your education. She's coming to find your professors and your teachers, all the people that have spread misinformation and false narratives. This book is going to help you. And for other aspects, it's going to help you make sense of some things that you just felt and couldn't necessarily confirm, right? You just felt it wasn't right. You felt it might not be that way. Right. And she's going to help clarify some things that maybe just didn't sit well in our spirit. Right. That's why I believe the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of information and clarity is a salve to our spirit, because God speaks things to us and then it gets confirmed by information such as this. The other thing that you're going to find, you don't even have to look for, is when you start viewing leadership, you're going to put them into one of two categories, maybe one of three. People who have done the reading and have educated themselves and are pushing for policy and change that is conducive to the information. Or, unfortunately, most leaders fall into one of two categories. People who are completely uneducated. They are in position, they are in leadership, and it is obvious that they are absolutely uneducated on what actually ails the community that they have been put in position to lead. And I mean spiritual leaders and leaders in the secular community. It's obvious because, as my sister said, if you are not bordering on angry and frustrated at all times discussing these subjects, you haven't done the reading. If you are quick to compromise, if you are quick to let up on the type of comprehensive nature of the legislation we need to address what's going on, you either haven't done the reading, or unfortunately, you have done the reading, you are aware of what actually ails our community, and you have been co-opted and are seeking your own advancement above what really is necessary to grow our community. Like leaders, when you become aware of this information, I guarantee you, you'll never look at your leaders the same. You'll never look at people that sit in these conversations where we're talking about life-changing scenarios, and all they have to offer are platitudes that actually have no foundation and the reality of what we're facing. You haven't done the reading, you haven't educated yourself, or you have chosen to advance yourself, because when you read this, you're only going to want hard answers, hard solutions. And you won't be able to look at leadership the same, and you won't be able to accept ignorance the same as you did before. And I'm just being honest. And our leadership, both white and black, is filled with people who are utterly ignorant on this subject of what actually ails our community. Just well-meaning, ignorant. Some not well-meaning and are choosing to be co-opted, because if you speak the truth that comes out of these kind of statistics, you won't find a whole lot of people that are going to hail you and love you. That's why they didn't like Martin Luther King until he was dead, right? Because he was speaking to what actually ailed our community. And you won't be able to look at your leadership the same after you've educated yourself.
I wanna throw this to Denisha. One of the young ladies on here said, do I need to emotionally prepare myself before reading this book? I want you, sister to sister, girlfriend to girlfriend, I want you to answer that question directly to her. does she need to emotionally prepare herself before diving into this book?
That's a very interesting question. Um, and my short answer is probably yes. But I think about James Baldwin's quote that essentially says to be a Black person and to be educated is to constantly be angry. So, but I think that something that Pastor Cass said, we've been feeling some things all along, but maybe we just didn't have the words and the language to describe what we were feeling anyway. And so we always have these emotions. We always have that irritability or that uneasiness or that kind of always looking over our shoulder or always wondering, is it me? So this book is going to, I think, put some things into perspective for you. So yes, I would say brace yourself for that. But one of the other things I think about is we don't brace ourselves to watch Love and Hip Hop. We don't brace ourselves to watch Game of Thrones. We don't brace ourselves to watch so many other things that get our emotions all riled up. And I think the reality of these things is we know that this is true. This is not just Hollywood. It's not just something I can turn away from. And not being able to turn it off is sometimes where the emotional space gets too unbearable. So, yes, prepare yourself. And as a counselor, I advocate for everybody to have a counselor, to have that supportive
Yes, you
network.
do.
But
Yes, you do.
I just don't think this is the only thing. I found comfort in these type of material. As Pastor was talking, I kept thinking to myself, this is the point of no return. After you cross certain thresholds, and even as the Lord was saying about 2020 being a year, he said some things you just can't unsee. And I think we're having that in our world right now. Some things we're not able to go back to business as usual. I have found it hard to even go back to posting regular stuff anymore. On my mental health page, I always try to post things that are lighthearted and encouraging. But I'm like, I don't even know how to find my way back there just yet. Because we can't just act like these last 2 weeks didn't happen. And as you read this book, you can't act like the last 400 years didn't happen. So prepare emotionally for not being able to go back to where you were. If you were, as Isaiah says, at ease on Zion or on those couches of ease, this is coming to stir you up. And I believe that is what the Holy Spirit is calling for this time, for us to be stirred up. So be prepared to have some emotions and also a place to process those emotions. Have a place where you can talk, whether it's at this platform here in this book club, in your family, in your church community, in a therapy session, small groups, whatever. Have a place where you can process those emotions so that we don't act incorrectly because we're emotional. And
I
that's
want
always the mandate that people say anyway, we're angry Black women. Not necessarily, but making sure that we know how to process our anger in ways that are productive and healthy.
She said
Absolutely.
that's heavy in a necessary way. So good,
It
good
is.
answer. Go ahead, Pastor. I'm sorry.
Can I just say, number one, my sister, for being a counselor, I love you. Listen, seeking counseling and therapy, I am such a huge advocate for that in our community, and Black women having a Black woman to talk to, and Black men having a Black man or even a Black woman, but just seeking counseling and therapy in general. Number one, let me just salute you for being
Thank you.
in a position that's so necessary for the health of our people. But I also want to say to those that, because we have talked about the heavy nature of the reading, I want to encourage you though. However, this is the pain of the birth of your new consciousness. And so I want you to encourage you to lean into the
Say that.
pain
That was
that we're
good. Say
referring
that again. This
to.
is the pain
Yeah.
of the birth of
Yes.
your new consciousness.
That's
Of your
good.
new consciousness. I promise you, lean into this pain. This is the pain that we sense when we look into the law and realize our inability to do it, and we realize how much we need grace. This is a birthing pain. You will love your people like you never loved them before. Once you become aware of this information, you will see yourself and those around you, your loved ones, in such a fresh light. So I don't want to scare you with the idea of this pain. I want you to know this is that good transformational pain. This is growth, and growing pains. That's what's going to be happening when you're going to be reading this. This is the scales falling from your eyes. This is Paul being knocked from his donkey and blinded kind of pain. Because I promise you, you're going to see people, yourself so differently. And this information is painful because, and for me, I can say for myself, it was painful because I judged us a certain way that was unhealthy. And now love was able to flood in when that judgment was removed. I encourage you to lean into this pain. It's the good kind. It's not just, pain for the sake of being masochistic. It's growth.
I
Absolutely.
want to stay with you, Pastor. And I want you to tell us your thoughts on this question. I'm a little nervous, but we're gonna see where we go. Why does our evangelical circle need to read this book? Because they may have tuned in. YLC, predominantly black, and we're unashamed about that. But we have some of our Caucasian brothers and sisters who worship with that, and we absolutely love it. So maybe one of them tuned in and they're excited about the movement. They're excited about Black Lives Matter. They're participating. They press the share button. They press the share button because they did. This conversation is now being had to an audience that's not just Black church, apostolic, Pentecostal, but it's now reached a evangelical circle, and they're watching and they're assuming because it's three young Black people on here talking that it's dealing with colorblindness that I don't need to read this book. I don't need to read that book. Why would our evangelical brothers and sisters need and benefit from diving into the new Jim Crow?
Sure. Now I'm not going to get anybody in trouble. I'm not going to act crazy today. I do that on my own platform. I don't come at crazy in other people's houses, so you cannot.
Amen.
But but here's the deal. One thing that makes me hopeful about this moment is I've never, in my 39 years, seen my white brothers and sisters so willing to not listen to say, what do I need to do, right? In the past, it was just Black people problem, what we needed to do. And those that were empathetic were like, I'm sorry that that's how you feel, as opposed to what do I need to do now? And I've gotten tons of those calls, right? And I'm sure all of us have, your white friends, white clergy reaching out to us and saying, hey, what do we need to do? Or what can I help you with? So the reason why I say they need to read this is if you are going to try to resolve an issue, because this is why we're at the crossroad of saying, okay, we understand you're angry. When we start talking about the type of solutions that are necessary to address what ails us, you are going to have to be aware of the depth of evil, the depth of planning and strategy that has gone into creating the scenarios that we're trying to address. Otherwise, you will not be creative enough. Your mind won't be open enough to the type of solutions that will be necessary to address these problems, right? It is similar, as Paul says in Rome, right, that the law showed us our flesh and what we couldn't do. Like, you don't understand how much you need salvation until you look into the law, right? And it's the same way. Our white brothers and sisters, even Black, won't understand the depth of the evil we're trying to address if you do not look into our history and how we got to this place. So, so many white people believe that they, and I'll just be honest with you. One of the things I struggle with is how strong an opinion people have when they are uneducated. Like, they have no clue what they're talking about, and then they have an opinion about how and why people are behaving the way that they are. Educate yourself, and then we can have a conversation. I'm not even saying you have to advocate for the exact same solutions that I would, but just at least tell me you have the information that I have. So for my white brothers and sisters who are repentant and want to help, you will not be able to come up with the type of solutions to genuinely help if you are not educated on the problems we're trying to correct. That's my nice way of saying that, right? A doctor, before he administers any medicine, before he writes you any prescriptions, before he cuts you open, has to do an analysis of what's actually wrong with you to determine if what he's going to prescribe is going to be strong enough, potent enough, and reach the places that are damaged and are hurt. So books like this, and not just when there's so much more reading and other books and reading that we can suggest, that my white evangelical brethren need to know that it is not a mistake. And here's the last thing. So many people that want to say it's not me, they plead ignorance. And will say, well, I didn't know. Here's the deal. you might not have known, but somebody in your leadership did know. These aren't mistakes. These aren't things that just happen because people who were ignorant just kept moving forward. No, this was intentional plotting and planning, and therefore it's going to take intentional plotting, planning, and strategy in order to undo it. So if our dialogue is going to continue in the depth of policy and laws and reform that we need to fix this, if we're going to be able to have that on the table, they're going to have to be educated on what it is we're trying to fix and address.
Good. We
Can
are.
I just add this?
Go.
I just want to add, I've been saying all week, the Bible says in Acts, God at once winked at ignorance, but now he's calling all men to repentance. And I think that this is applicable to where we are now. We can no longer just sit in a place of, I didn't know, so it's not my fault. It is your responsibility, it is your civic duty, it is your Christ duty to be informed about what needs to happen. So that way we can actually repent for real, not just saying, we're sorry to our Black community. No, we need some more than just words. NFL don't send out no video. We need some more than just our words at this point.
And if you aren't willing to read a book, how sincere and contrite can your heart really be? How much should I really trust you? Should I really trust you in your contrition if you're not willing to read a book? And I say this specifically, and I got to cause a little trouble. If there's a white person listening and your white pastor always leads this conversation with, we have a multicultural church, stop it. That's the religious version of I have Black friends. And we know multiculturalism is no indication of righteousness presence. Plantations were multicultural. Black people in this country, we have become comfortable with having to exist under oppression, under sin, under racism. So Black people's willingness to participate in your religious rituals do not say and does not indicate that you have righteousness in your leadership, that you have genuinely repented for sin. That just means Black people can bear the burden of your unrighteousness, and we've been doing it for 400 years. So do not consider yourselves outside of needing to educate yourself and repent because you have a multicultural congregation. And generally, when a person leaves with that tells me they don't know the depth of this problem, because us just being able to have a church together does not say that you're working on actually fixing this problem. And you would be embarrassed to lead with that if you've really been doing the work of reconciliation.
And if I could say back to that, I used to teach. I used to teach cross-cultural counseling at Xavier University. And the reason that's a part of the curriculum for up-and-coming counselors is because most of the helping profession is Caucasian. So I think I heard a statistic last week that 86% of all teachers are Caucasian. So if we're really going to have capacity, then we have to teach people about the experiences of those that they're actually serving. So the pastor who does stand up and say, we have a multicultural church, and you have not done the work to actually serve your people, you're not doing Christ's leadership yet. You're not doing Christ's servanthood yet.
Now listen, this is my walking stick, and I see the founder of the conference, his comment on it's not multicultural, it's multi-ethnic. Now this is my walking stick. Now we go a whole other hour because I think it is sinful what some of these white pastors are doing and using Black people as props to attract more, because there are no better church members than Black folk. As the white population of Christians in this country are dwindling, pursuing Black members is just good business. It does not mean you have a good heart. And I'm telling my Black leaders on this call, do not underestimate the importance of the Black church. There aren't very many institutions remaining in this country that focus on the development of Black leaders, that focus on the development of Black boys and Black girls, that the Black church is one of the last bastions and institutions in this country whose focus is on Black people. If you just do the reading of what happens when you have segregated higher education and the flourishing of historically Black colleges and universities, and what happens to HBCUs once integration happens. But at the same time, what happens to the number of doctors and engineers, that the number of Black doctors in the United States peaked in 1978. After, there's less Black doctors now, because white institutions don't have a vested interest in the development and growth of Black people, where Black institutions like Meharry, they're like, when you come here, we're making you a doctor. But go to a PWI, they like, at the first sign of struggle, they'll tell you, consider another major. Maybe you should do something else. And it's the same thing. And us subjecting our children to multicultural churches who are not invested in their development and cannot see Black leadership beyond their white supremacist veil, they'll see your son get in trouble and he'll be on the blacklist. They won't see leadership in that young man. They'll see what they call an attitude in your Black daughter and won't see the gifting of God in her. So I want my young leaders who are on here to genuinely appreciate Black church. I know we don't have LCD screens and smoke machines and laser light shows and we can't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on our marketing and things of that nature, but nobody is going to love your soul and invest in your development like a Black church. And we must protect them at all costs, which is why I appreciate what you guys are doing here and developing our next generation of leaders. Because if we allow the Black church to die, the next generation of Black leaders will die along with it. Because these white churches and so-called multi-ethnic churches are not invested in our leadership. And all you have to do is look at their elder board, their executive board, their pastoral team, their preaching team, and you'll see. Praise and worship, they'll let us do that. Greeting, they'll let us do that. Yeah, they'll let you do stuff that'll get you on the IG page, but they won't let you do stuff that'll determine where the money goes and what communities you guys build in and what preachers you guys bring in. So Elder Moore,
it's a modern day stepping fetch, modern day minstrel show.
Listen.
It is. Let me stop. I'm done.
This is what I want to do. I want to tease them so they join us next week. I feel like we're right at the brink of going there. And I feel like the excitement that I had about having you two on here, you got to meet our audience. They've got to meet you. They know that I didn't bring in just anybody. And now they're at the edge of their seats because they're excited. And I kind of want to just close the book now and tell them, join us next week. That's what I want to do. I don't know. And this is just an old preacher trick. I'm going to ask everybody watching. I don't know what y'all doing next week. But listen, Elder Moore said go there. Elder Moore, who is the founder, my brother and my friend, he said go there. So we're going to stay. I was going to leave a cliffhanger, but let's go there. Just a few minutes. So we've been on for 52 minutes. We're going to close in an hour. That gives us 8 minutes. But I want to go here because we've had a lot of conversations this week. There's been conversations going on all week on my timeline. And I've watched some of them with great expectation because my thought was, oh, you got so-and-so and so-and-so, and they're representing this organization who ain't put nothing on Instagram, who ain't put nothing on their church web, oh, this is going to be a great discussion. No, let's go. And it's been very, it's been very, 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 very shallow. A word that I'll take from Pastor Cast, and hopefully he doesn't mind me saying this because it was a private conversation, but he said very fruitless. He talked about these being some fruitless conversations. So let's go there. What needs to be discussed that has not been discussed? This is a young leaders book club. This is the young leaders. They're watching these conversations. They're looking at their elders. They're looking at their bishops. They're looking at their leaders have conversations and not say the stuff that we say in our barbershop. They don't say the stuff that we say when we're on the phone driving. They don't say what's said when we're having those conversations with what is missing from these surface level conversations? I'm going to ask Denisha to go first so we can prepare ourselves. And then I'm going to ask Pastor Cass to go in. So Denisha, if you just want to go straight to Pastor Cass, you can. But what's missing? What's missing in these conversations?
I think exactly what you just said is what's missing. Why won't we say certain things in certain spaces? We say them to one another, but we don't say them in a public view. And I think that's been the problem. We want to say it in secret because we want a reputation, or we want to uphold a certain viewpoint. And I have to be honest, even as I'm watching on my share party, I'm looking at who's watching and I'm thinking, okay, do I want to be offensive? How far do I go? And I think at this point, we don't have the privilege anymore of not being out there. And I think the things we say in our barbershops, the things we say in our homes, the things we say in our cars when we're talking is the thing that we need to say in public spaces. We need to call it what it is. We need to cry loud and spare not. And I'm not talking about hurting people's feelings intentionally, but bringing truth that brings change. And until we start saying the things that everybody's thinking, we're not going to see change. So I'm going to pass it over to the pastor now on that, because I don't want to get too stirred up.
All right. Well, I'm not watching comments. I'm not even on Facebook, so I don't even have nobody to worry about being mad at me. Listen, two things. Number one, to any black person, and I'm talking to us and black folks, right? My main question is, what qualifies you to be somebody that leads one of these discussions? And I'm not even saying necessarily formal education, but what work have you done to understand that, as I referred to earlier, to understand the depth of our situation and how we got here, that will qualify you to mount a public platform and speak on the behalf of the rest of us. Now, as a black person in this country, you are qualified to say what you think, say what you feel. You are more than qualified. But when we start talking about getting on multicultural platforms with thousands of people, what qualifies you and what work have you done to prepare for this? I'm tired of just because we're black, that means they should be in this conversation. Secondly, if you are not willing to bring accountability to your white counterparts that are on these discussions, it is better, you do more harm than good by having the conversation. Because what's happening in a lot of instances is a lot of white pastors, white leaders are believing they've done the work by having conversations. And if you let this pastor off the hook because he had a conversation with a black person and he didn't come out of it having been held accountable for his and the actions of white evangelical Christianity or whatever organization he or she may be a part of, if they did not walk away with a list of things that they are required to do in order to show contrition and in actual heart to fix things, you actually have done a disservice, because you may have gave someone the impression that they have done the work by having a conversation with you. So if you're not willing to bring conflict, accountability, and cries for repentance and action, then you're better off not having the conversation, because there are so many people who have walked away feeling like they've done the work because they've had a conversation. And I'm tired of conversations. And I'm tired of conversations where black leaders come to these discussions without any idea of what they would ask a black or a white pastor to do, an idea of what they would ask a mayor or a governor or a police chief to do. Don't have the conversation until you know what your ask is going in. And if you need some help on what your ask should be, I got plenty of suggestions.
And there, his Instagram is right there. So if you got if you need any of those suggestions, you can hit him up. Our sister Denisha, I believe she had a call. She may be able to join us back, but we're getting ready to Pastor kind of go through. There she is. I think she got nervous. She was like, I don't know what he's gonna say. Let me log off real quick.
No, the devil. No, that wasn't the devil. Somebody FaceTiming. But
I'm
back.
We're at 58 minutes. I would love for you two to join me next week. I do not know what your schedule is. You don't have to give me an answer right now. But check your schedule, see if you can. I would love for you to join us next week. Everybody that's tuned in, we are going to read chapter 1 and 2. We're going to dive into chapter 1 and 2 next week, and we'll continue this conversation. We're going to discuss some of the findings, some of the facts, some of the, oh my goodness, did that really go down like that? But I want you to give us, your closing remarks. We're at consider us at the gala celebrating pastor's anniversary, and now you get to get up and give your last little remarks. We're going to let Pastor Cass go first, and we're going to make sure that nobody FaceTimes Denisha so she could join us. And then
I really did put this on Do Not Disturb, y'all. I did, but my favorite came through. And then we'll
close it out. So, Pastor, if you could give us 30 to 60 seconds of your push for us to read this and just somewhat of your closing remarks.
First and foremost, and I appreciate you, my good brother Lewis, for diving in and facilitating this and having the heart to bring this type of information to the young leaders. conference. It's so important. It's critical because as leaders, right, we need to be educated. And my last thing is, I promise you, every person on here, specifically to my Black people, I love your souls. You are so special. You are so gifted. And I'm not saying that as a platitude. I'm saying that as someone that has understood the degree of evil it's taken to keep you in the position that you're in. And I'm so excited of your journey that you're beginning. If you haven't been reading this type of material, the journey that you're beginning on, because this is just one of many books, right? There's books like When Affirmative Action Was White. Boy, oh boy, you want to talk about a paradigm destroying book. The Case for Reparations, it's a long form essay by Ta-Nehisi Coates, or The Warmth of Other Suns. That's a book blew my mind when you talk about how the United States is the way that it is. So just consider that this is a journey on your pathway to loving yourself, loving your people, and being an advocate that can genuinely lead our people in the direction that we're going. I appreciate you guys having me today.
Thank you so much. Stick around, Pastor. Denisha, give us your closing remarks.
I echo what Pastor Cass said, and I also want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate today. I was thinking about a process in my life very similar to salvation, was what I call the process of the undoing. And I've had many of those moments that have led to that, really undoing things that I was taught, the unlearning, the way that my mind was still in captivity, whether it was about God or about society and things like that. And I'm thankful for that process of the undoing. And I feel like every day there's something else that is constantly being undone. I think the Bible probably calls it the being transformed, or the transformation, or renewing mind. So I think that this book is another very important part of undoing, not just for Blacks, but anybody who will pick it up. You can't be the same. We sing that song, "You won't leave the same in Jesus' name." You won't leave this book the same way, because it's going to actually undo some of the things that need to be undone, strongholds that need to be broken, things that we have been thinking about, feeling, that have just not been, firstly, God. So I think that this is a great time. This is an opportunity. Don't miss this opportunity. You will not regret that you did it. You'll just regret that you didn't do it sooner. So get ready, guys, because this is really the point of no return. So I'm excited for everybody's journey.
The New Jim Crow: Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness. We didn't even get to deal with, should we be colorblind? And maybe we'll see about that later. But she said, no, I don't want to deal with that right now. Listen,
no, I'm saying no, we don't need to.
Thank you so much to the two of you for joining us. Everybody, join us here next week. We'll be reading we'll be discussing chapters 1 and 2. We're going to dive into some of the facts, some of the information, some of the OMG moments and all that. Thank you to my brother and my friend, Elder Mark Moore Jr., the founder and visionary of this entire movement. Do not take it for granted that he allows us to have these discussions and even have this book club with you all weekly. Press the share button one more time. You don't know who can watch the replay. Next week, chapters 1 and 2. I'm so excited. Also, I forgot, go to YouTube. Subscribe and like YLC TV. There's a lot of information that's getting ready to be dropped. Not information, new content that is being ready, getting ready to be dropped on there. So go to YouTube, subscribe, and watch YLC TV. We'll see you all next week. Have a good one. Peace.